Hello and good morning everyone. My name is Andy Griffiths and it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Q Associates and Rubrik to this morning's live broadcast. So for those of you not familiar with Q, we are an independent IT services specialist working with over 700 UK customers to design, deploy and support their core IT environments. We also have strong relationships with many of the world's leading technology companies. So part of the value we provide is to keep our clients informed of the emerging technology companies that may have something valuable or innovative to offer when addressing their IT objectives and specific priorities. One such organization is Rubrik, and the key purpose of today's event is to provide an introduction to one of the most exciting and fast-growing technology companies that we have seen in recent years. Much of our work at Q Associates involves the management and protection of data, and Rubrik are now making a real difference across our client base with their approach to protecting data within data centers and in the cloud. I'm joined this morning by three specialists from Rubrik, Rob, Juliet and Stu. And over the next 30 minutes or so, we hope to provide an introduction to Rubrik, a live demonstration of key features and functionality, and also to ask any questions that you may wish to ask along the way. So thank you for joining us this morning. And Rob, over to you.
Thanks very much, Andy, and good morning, guys. Welcome to the webinar. As Andy said, we're going to run through an introduction to Rubrik in association with Q Associates. The agenda for today's session is to run through an overview of the product itself, which will be around 10 minutes, run by myself. And then Juliet, my systems engineer, will run through a demo of our core functionality, which is our cloud data management platform. And then we'll follow up with any questions that you guys had from both my involvement and Juliet's involvement as well. So to start the presentation, we like to start with this slide, as it maps out the journey that Rubrik's had over its existence for the last 6 years. And the reason why it is relevant to yourselves who are watching this presentation is the fact that it shows the advancements and the actual tech that we've brought to market in quite a short period of time. Now, these releases can be seen from the left and to the right of the top of the slide, and just shows that our investment is very large into the tech part of it and from the engineering point of view as well. Now, these investments have been made mainly down to the fact that our customer base is giving us some feedback, and we've been able to be agile to that feedback and been able to put these things to market from a product perspective over the 6 years that we've been in existence. It's not just the customers, however, that have given us this feedback, though. It's some of the third-party organizations that we all know in the industry as well. So some to highlight from the below are some alliance partners that we work very closely with. So VMware is a big alliance of Rubrik, and we've been recognized over the last 2 or 3 years at their VMware World Show over in Barcelona, as we've been recognized for the best in show from a security perspective in 2018, and had best in shows for the last 4 years with VMware as well. And then on the flip side, there's been some auditing organizations, the likes of Gartner and Forrester, who have put us as leaders in their Magic Quadrant, and also from a wave leader from the Forrester perspective. And in light with that as well, Gartner's Peer Insights, we were actually their customer choice of 2020 with some really good feedback, which shows that our customers are happy to discuss the feedback that they have in terms of positive feedback from a product perspective, from a technical perspective and support perspective that they receive through the lifespan of their contract with Rubrik. So this really just shows you where the advancements have been, who's recognized us, to give you some confidence in Rubrik. We then have been able to make these engineering and technology and points by some of the leading people in the industry. Our organization is spearheaded by 3 founders, and that is spearheaded by Bipul Sinha, who was the founder of Rubrik, and he actually comes from an Oracle background. He's been in the industry for years, and actually he was the first investor in Nutanix back when they started, so has an eye for disruptive technology. And he saw that there was a gap in the data protection space, they needed to be addressed because there hadn't been much movement over the last 20-25 years. He's been able to make these investments in the technology by the fact that he's had some big investors into the Rubrik platform, and these guys can be seen below the three founders. And as you guys will see, they are some of the biggest names in the data protection industry that have been involved over the last 20 years. The one that's most relevant to us in the UK is probably John Thompson, and John Thompson's actually the current chairman of Microsoft. And that actually fits in really nicely with our alliance to Microsoft and our partnership with some of the cloud providers in the UK and globally as well, meaning that we have some really clever features that we'll touch on later on in the presentation and the demo that links into those cloud platforms to make it really simple to take those on board. And to give you confidence that obviously customers are buying the product, and we've now actually got over 2,500 organizations on board with Rubrik, and they span from the top enterprise organizations down to the mid-market organizations, due to the fact of the way that the technology is able to scale and make things simple and reduce the complexity of this area that we'll discuss shortly. But to bring it a little bit closer to home, we've sort of identified 5 key references that we've got in the UK, and then map them to some business benefits that you will see from the Rubrik product. So the main product benefits that you will see is this application availability and the ability to obviously leverage the cloud where appropriate, give you some really robust security and compliance around your backup and data protection infrastructure, make things simple and give you speed in that area, and then bring a level of automation into that as well. Now, I won't delve into too much detail around these points because I'll actually come back to them when we cover the features later on in the demonstration. But it's good to show that we've got some really strong references in the UK, and we're more than happy to set conversations up with these organisations if you wanted to move forward with Rubrik conversation. So to set the scene of why Rubrik was born, the reason why it did come to market, as I said, Bipple has been there and actually seen disruptive technology take off with Nutanix, and he saw a gap in the market for the fact that the data management landscape hadn't really changed from the 1990s to the present day, and the reason for this was a lot of the vendors that we see and a lot of the complexity that we see in customers' environments means that there is large amounts of hardware in this area, large amounts of software in this area, large amounts of support, large amounts of people needing to manage this infrastructure that you see on the slide. And all this complexity means that it takes away valuable time from organizations to be doing productive things in their environments to deliver a good service to their customers internally within their organizations. We also find that it doesn't really play into what organizations need and want in the current landscape. From a C-level strategy across the board, they're all looking at ways of leveraging the cloud where appropriate. They're all looking at ways to bring automation to mean that less staff have to do these jobs for organizations. And then thirdly, they need to make sure that their backup and data management infrastructure is protected with a high level of security, due to the fact that actually backup is now seen as sort of that crown jewels of data, meaning that everything is stored in the backup, and if someone were to get hold of that, it could be quite detrimental to the organization. And these past historic setups don't really play in to these strategies that the C-levels are looking at. So Rubrik saw a massive opportunity in the marketplace to do something about it, and what we actually did was to flatten that complexity down to a single software fabric for complete data management across data center and cloud, given the ability for organizations to leverage the cloud, the ability to automate processes in this backup arena, and then give you a level of security that none of our competitors can give, due to things that we'll touch on later on in the presentation. So these are sort of the key pillars that we see Rubrik enable organizations to leverage, but they're built out of many features. So what we'll do now is jump into what those features are. So from the get-go, Rubrik is very easy to set up and get implemented. So from a professional services point of view, we had an example over the COVID-19 pandemic where an organization had purchased Rubrik and needed to implement it due to their current infrastructure going end of life, end of support. We were actually able to implement quite a large rollout completely remotely, and it took a matter of 2 hours to get the system up and running and pointing at a target where the organization could see their data in a cloud platform.
And then on that simplicity theme, one of the key differences with Rubrik compared to traditional backup products is that we use global SLA policies to configure and manage backups. So instead of all the traditional individual backup jobs that you had to manage in traditional systems, and as a backup admin back in the day, that kind of granular management that took up virtually all my time running individual jobs and managing individual schedules, what really attracted me to Rubrik as a backup admin was this concept of SLA policies, where rather than having to set up and manage individual backup schedules and jobs and retention rules, the SLA policy management just does all that for you. So you just basically have to tell the system what protection you want via the SLA policy that you assign to your workloads, and then the Rubrik system takes care of all the scheduling and job management for you.
And then another feature that sort of then jumps on that simple aspect is the fact that we're looking at driving down the RTO and RPO to near zero. And the way that we do that is by having some clever features that build this out. The first one is for live mount for virtual machines. So Juliet, are you all right to explain exactly what that is?
Yeah, so live mount very simply is the ability to restore a full VM or database backup in a matter of seconds over the network as an NFS share back to your on-premise infrastructure with the storage hosted on the Rubrik cluster rather than locally on your infrastructure. So you can quickly maybe get a website or whatever back online, or provision an exact copy of a VM for test and dev, or an entire database to run reports against without affecting the production systems or using any of your backend storage. And I'll show you a bit more about how that works in the demo.
Yeah, and a live example where we've seen a customer really benefit from this was Reading University, where they actually had some issues before they purchased Rubrik in terms of the time that it took to recover their SQL database, which was critical to their organization. It was taking them between sort of 12 and 13 hours to recover this. And when they implemented Rubrik, it went down to a matter of minutes. And as Juliet says, she'll actually show you how this works and how simple this is from a VM perspective on the demo. We've also built on that simple aspect and built in a Google-like search functionality, which is a global search functionality built in. And this stems from one of our founders actually coming across from Google and bringing his expertise to set this up. And it just means that from setting a couple of details into that search functionality, it brings back rich data across the estate, and you're able to pinpoint things very, very, very quickly.
And another feature that's pretty unique to Rubrik is this concept of NAS Direct Archive. And very simply, what this feature does is it allows you to save your NAS backup data directly to a low-cost archival location, such as the cloud, without having to land it or store it anywhere first. Because as we all know, protecting large file stores is very resource intensive on your storage, your network, etc. So with this feature, you can directly transfer your large NAS backups to external archival storage rather than first storing them on the Rubrik backup appliance. So this, of course, means you don't need as much space for your backups. And then, of course, once you have this file data safely archived in the cloud, you can, of course, start reclaiming space back on your on-prem NAS and making significant storage cost savings there as well.
And then to build on what those sort of three pillars that I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, one of the main things that all organizations are looking for now is a level of security with any technology that they purchase. I mentioned that backup is really seen as that crown jewels, because when you've ingested the data through the Rubrik setup, you get a end-to-end encryption built in, and then it's actually put into another level of security, which is put into an immutability state. Juliet, you're okay to just go through exactly what we mean by immutable?
Yeah, so obviously an immutable object is one whose state can't be changed or modified after it's been taken, and that sounds ideal for backups, right? You don't want them to be tampered with after you've taken them, otherwise what's the point of them? You can't rely on them. But actually many traditional backup systems are Windows based, and so by definition are using a read-write file system. So when the founders of Rubrik looked around at the available file systems in the marketplace, they realized that there wasn't really a suitable one available to give that guaranteed built-in immutability. So they developed their own write-only file system for storing Rubrik backups. This is our Atlas file system, and what that gives you is that built-in immutability for your Rubrik backups, and it means that nobody can access the backup data after it's been taken. And there are some other kind of additional features that sit on top of that and further enhance this baked-in immutability. It's an append-only file system, so all writes are out of place and new writes can never touch previously written backup data. The data is fingerprinted when the backups are ingested. All internal cluster communications are through authenticated APIs only. And this overall immutable architecture means that compared to many legacy backup products, there's just no mechanism to tamper with the backups once they've been taken. And this means that you have those highly reliable backups to restore from. And it's also the foundation for the extra value services that we can then start to provide from your Rubrik backups on top of that, around things like ransomware recovery and data classification for compliance and what have you.
And then we move on to the ability to obviously drive the usage of cloud through the Rubrik platform. So as you can see on the screen, there's sort of some new information that's come on. So you're able to obviously point these backups to different targets. You can either do it to the public cloud, which you can see we're agnostic in that field from an AWS point of view, Google or Azure, or you can actually leverage private cloud if you've made this investment already. So we're really flexible in the way that we deliver this. We have sort of two functions that we name it in Rubrik, and the first one is cloud out. Now this is taking that point around where Juliet is said that you set an SLA policy and you say where you want your data to be targeted. You would actually say, for example, point it at Azure, and then it would be archived in Azure very easily and access through that global search functionality that's mentioned in a matter of hours, depending on the size of the estate. There was a great example of where people are leveraging this to just decrease their hardware footprint. So Cranfield University is a customer of Rubrik's, and they actually got rid of their second DR site, which meant that their DC footprint went down by 50%, which was a big cost saving to those due to the fact that they had a Rubrik cluster sat on their primary site, pointed it up to the cloud, and there was no need to have that secondary site anymore.
And then cloud on for cloud instantiation, that's very, very simply the ability to convert your on-prem VMs into Azure or Amazon VMs running in the cloud. So that gives you possibly that DR capability into the cloud instead of maybe using a second data center, as Rob mentioned. And it's also part of that cloud mobility piece, because you can use your Rubrik backups to get workloads into the cloud. And one of the other sort of core tenets of Rubrik is that we call ourselves an API first platform. And again, what that very simply means is that every feature you see available through the Rubrik interface uses Rubrik's own APIs, and these APIs are open, published. We have available on GitHub, so you can very easily integrate whatever scripting or automation tools you use in your environment. And Rubrik are always really keen to help customers build any new integrations that they might need as well.
So as you see, there's some rich features that are included in our core platform, which is the cloud data management piece. We've obviously done a high level of these, but we will go into more detail in the demo that you'll see from Juliet. But if there is any questions, then please let us know through the chat or the questions that you have on the left-hand side. But also, if you wanted to carry on any questions after this session, please get in touch with Q or ourselves directly, and we'd be happy to go through these in more detail. In terms of this core platform, this is where we sort of stemmed from as an organisation, and where we've seen great success. But Bipul, our founder, didn't want to stop there. He didn't want Rubrik to just be another backup vendor that was given an insurance policy to its customers. He wanted to drive some significant value out of the product. And the way that we've done that is the fact that if you have invested in Rubrik, we've then ingested the rich data and normally the whole of the data that an organization has, and we are backing up that data. So we have visibility of whether that is in the cloud, whether that is in a hybrid state, or whether that's on premise. So we have visibility of everything within the estate. What we then want to do is drive value through the visibility of that data. So we have access to all the rich metadata that you guys have as an organization. So what we've decided to do is build a SaaS platform that complements our cloud data management platform that is built up of 5 applications. The first application is our global management. Now, view this as a manager of managers. No matter where any of the infrastructure it sits, you're able to manage it through this single pane of glass. You're able to see the health of that workload. You're able to see whether there's anything needing to be actioned. You can also put it up in the IT team's service desk rooms to show that you can see the health, and you can see that there's green bars, there's red bar, there's amber, to show the health of those workloads from a global management point of view. It's also, if you've got a dispersed workload across different sites, you're able to manage it from a single site to give you that simple management functionality. The second function is around ransomware recovery. So this adds on to the inbuilt security from an encrypted and immutability point of view. We've now then taken it on from another level. We've seen that more and more organizations are getting hit with ransomware that starts within the backup infrastructure. We've had some classic examples within the UK recently where ransomware has hit the backup infrastructure. It's been sat dormant for a couple of months. It's then encrypted, and organizations have not got the ability to find a clean point in time where they're able to access their data, which means that there's a cost implication, there's downtime. It's very hard for organizations to actually get back to a clean point of time. So this product Radar gives them the customers the ability to detect and remediate from ransomware. And we're actually running a separate session solely on ransomware recovery in a couple of weeks' time that Andy will touch on later on in the presentation. So if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about that, please join us in 2 weeks' time. The third one is around Office 365 protection. As we know, Microsoft don't natively back up Office 365. So we've put a solution together that is able to back this up successfully. It's very easy to install. We had an example again in the current pandemic that we're in, that we actually got an organization that was 4,000 users up and running within a matter of minutes. And it all was done remotely with our Office 365 protection. We're actually running a separate session for this as well in 6 weeks' time. So if you are interested in this, or you wanted to find something out sooner, please reach out to either Q or ourselves on this element as well. We then take it on from Office 365 to the ability to back up native workloads. So whether that be in AWS or Azure, again, they don't natively back that up. So we have the ability to back up those native workloads, as we're seeing more and more organizations needing the demand for this. And then the final one, and our most recent release, is around data classification. So being able to map certain compliances that we have in the UK and globally that needed to be addressed from a data management perspective. So the ones that are most common in the UK are around GDPR and PCI. So what Polaris Sonar gives you the ability to do is classify that data against those policies and set those policies. So we had an example where Reading University actually bought Sonar for the reasons that it gave them visibility and the ability to say that they were PCI compliant. Again, we are going to run a session on data classification in more detail, and if you wanted to find anything out about this, we're able to do this separately as well. So from the session, in terms of the introduction, we're now going to jump into to the demo. We've touched on the cloud data management piece, which is our core offering. We've then touched on the overview of Polaris from a SaaS platform. So to summarize what Rubrik would give you as an organization, it would reduce your complexity and cost from the features that we've seen, release time back to the organization, reduce data loss, improve system availability through the recovery and the ability to search very quickly, improve security, not seen out there in the industry from a backup perspective from anyone else, transition backup data into an asset through that Polaris SaaS platform, and improve visibility of your data through Sonar, and then start that cloud journey or accelerate that cloud journey due to the fact that we're able to easily point things up and access things within the cloud. So what I'd like to do now is for Lucy to pass on the reins to Juliet to take you through the demo and jump into some of the features that we've touched on a high level. So over to you, Juliet.
Yep, okay. Can you see my screen okay there, Rob?
Yep, all good.
Okay, so when you log into your Rubrik cluster from a browser, it's all HTML5. You can run it from anywhere with Active Directory integration. So there's no GUI to install or anything like that. And as we pointed out earlier, everything I do in the user interface uses Rubrik's own APIs, and of course that gives you all the sort of automation and orchestration hooks into the product that you possibly don't have with your existing backup tools. And that's really, the basis of our kind of API-based philosophy. And once you log in, you see our cloud data management platform running here on a Rubrik appliance, and what we call bricks. And most people will be running the software on a brick while they're in a kind of hybrid state, with workloads on-prem and in the cloud, as that makes the most sense. But it could equally be running natively in the cloud as well. And a brick is just a small 2U appliance optimized for throughput, 4 independent nodes, and then you can just scale that out in increments of 1 node from there as you need them. And every node in the Rubrik cluster is actually running the same cloud data management user interface software, so you can connect to it and manage the entire cluster from any node. And when you log in, you're presented with this sort of fairly typical dashboard view as you'd expect for a backup product. And it's a nice, clean, intuitive dashboard, just as you'd expect from a modern system. There's some headline views here where you can drill down to get more information about the health of your Rubrik cluster, some other stats around dedupe and that kind of thing. And one thing to highlight here is this Rubrik predictive global search that Rob mentioned. So you can quickly find things using this across all known objects are indexed in the Rubrik cluster. So if I just type in a part of my name, you can see sort of any system that contains that keyword search. And on the left here, you can see all the workloads that are protected under Rubrik. So you've got your virtual machines here. You've got physical servers, databases, NAS shares, any cloud native workloads if you've got them. And what I'm going to show you today is, I'll focus on VMware protection just as a sort of demonstration of the functionality and the features and how Rubrik works. But essentially, the workload is the same for other hypervisors, databases, what have you. And I think we've got another session on databases coming up where we can drill into that some more. So, as we mentioned initially, that the kind of, I think, one of the key differentiators for Rubrik is this concept of using SLA domains to manage them. And as someone that used to spend a lot of time setting up backups and individual jobs and managing policies and all that kind of stuff, I really think this is a kind of a big benefit of the system. And I think probably the best way to show you how that works is just to kind of set one up. So basically, what you've got is, frequency, how often do you want to take backups here on the left, and how long do you want to keep them for on the right, and that's essentially it. And if I just run through one, give it a name, you typically do kind of what you're doing already in your environment, maybe. So you'd probably do something like, a daily backup, keep it for 14 days, maybe a monthly backup, keep it for a year, something like that. And then maybe you know, an annual backup and keep that for 12 months. But a key thing about Rubrik backups is that because after the initial full ingest, it's incremental technology forever. So we would encourage our customers to maybe do a more frequent backup as well, something like an hourly one. Keep that for 3 days, because the backups are so lightweight and you don't sort of tend to get VM stun issues and things like that. There is a snapshot window feature down here, so if you are in an environment where perhaps you people only want you to do backups overnight, or for compliance reasons, you could set a snapshot window, a backup window here. But as I say, most people don't find that necessary and we don't really use it. There's a retention lock feature here, so if you want your SLA policies to be worm compliant, you can do that. Continuous data protection is a fairly new feature that's available currently for VMware VMs, and basically what that's saying is that as well as doing your sort of traditional snapshot backups, we do journaled writes as well. So you have this sort of continuous protection where the IOs from the VMs is captured using the native VMware APIs, and therefore you've got those almost instant RPOs for your supercritical important VMs. Then if we carry on here, you see that you've told the system this is what data protection looks like, this is how often I want to do it, and now where do I want to put it. So if we use this archive tab here, you'll see that any archive locations that I've previously configured to this Rubrik cluster will be available. So most people are going to be sending it to maybe Azure or AWS or Google, but equally you could use any kind of object S3 compliant object store that you might have in your environment. And if we then come up here, what this is saying is that you get the ability with the retention on brick slider to say how long do I want to keep stuff locally on the Rubrik appliance. So maybe after those initial backups are taken, you might want to keep something like 14 days of backups locally on the appliance, because that's maybe going to reflect, you know, the times that most people are going to be looking for user file restore. So keep that super local in your data center, and then what that would say is that anything to the right of that will then get sent to whatever archive location we configure here. So backups will be kept on the brick for 14 days and then sent up to Azure after that. And equally, you can use this enable instant archive tab here, and what that will say is, sorry, checkbox, that will say also instantly send a copy of the backup up to cloud. So there, that gives you that kind of DR piece. So if you want to have backup locally and also one out in the cloud straight away, you can then maybe get to the point where people are starting, you know, we've got a lot of customers that are starting to say, well, perhaps I don't need that second site data center because I've got that instant offsite backuping going up to the cloud. Equally, if you do want to, you know, if you've got very strict sort of DR policies that say you need an offsite backup on-prem as well, you can send copies of your backups over to another brick in your secondary data center as well. But as I say, most people are sort of moving away from that two-site data center model and putting stuff up to the cloud. And then the tiering here is just a kind of a nice feature we have for workload management. Once that stuff's up in the cloud, obviously a lot of people worry about cloud costs. If you take backups and then just sort of dump them into a default tier and maybe start getting unanticipated storage costs, we do have the ability to dovetail into Azure, what we call Azure Smart Tiering, and that just means that you can say maybe it's archived data, maybe I want to keep it you know, on a hot or a cool tier for 30 days, but after that I can start aging that workload out into very cold archive storage, just to sort of manage those cloud costs. And that's pretty much it for an SLA policy. You literally just tell the system what data protection looks like for you, and then of course the thing then is applying it to your workloads. And you can see here, because this is a demo system, there's loads of different SLA policies here, but most people would typically have you could have one SLA policy managing all your workloads, but it would be probably more typical to have one sending stuff to AWS, one sending stuff to Azure, maybe one for your database retention policies and log files and that kind of thing. So if I show you again using VMware as an example, how I would then apply that protection, I could do it at the individual VM level. So I'm on a demo system here that's got a VM that's got a part of my name in the title. So if I just quickly pull that up again using this global search functionality across the whole cluster. You can find your machine or groups of machines and click manage protection, and then just find the SLA policy that you want to apply. Again, you can just search for them or mouse down and find them here. And that's okay, for individual machines, but it's possibly a little bit old-fashioned and time-consuming. So what I think is a better way is that if your VMware environment is quite organized into folders, you can drill down at the folder level and apply that same protection, at various different levels. And equally, you can do the same at the cluster host level. So you can go down into individual ESXi hosts and maybe apply the same protection there. And again, if you use VMware tags in your environment, you could do it at that level as well, and apply that same protection at the tag level. And that really just shows how simple it is to set up backup and then manage it. You apply your SLA policy and then just leave the system to do all the scheduling and job management for you. And then, of course, once you've so compared to traditional backup software, you can see that creating an SLA policy that will manage all your backups for you. There were no individual jobs or schedules to manage where you have to specify everything. I just use these SLA policies, assign them to my systems that I want protected, and then the Rubrik software will do that protection at the right intervals and do all the job creation and direct the backups to the right place, wherever I've set that on the SLA policy. The software is dynamically managing all that scheduling real time without impacting host or Rubrik performance. But if you are particularly worried about maybe impacting production systems, there are some additional parameters you can add in that let you do things like measure CPU and latency so that the system will back away from a backup before resuming when those parameters go back down below threshold levels. So that's how you assign SLAs to objects you want to protect. And that I've showed you the workflow for VMware, but it's exactly the same for any other workload that you might want protected. Now, obviously, that we've seen how we protect the system. So now I need to show you how we do recoveries. And I think I'll show you file recoveries first, how to recover an individual file, because that's possibly a little bit, it's not very exciting. You'd expect any backup product to be able to do that, but let's face it, it's the main task that your users are going to be looking for, on a daily or weekly basis. So again, I can go in, I'll find my particular VM here, pull it up, and if I drill down into that object that's been protected under VMware, you see that you get this under Rubrik, you get this calendar view, and what these little blue blobs mean that on those particular days that there are Rubrik snapshots in the system, and then there's some information about what SLA policy is protecting that workload, when the next snapshots are, how many have been taken in the system, etc. And again, I can use that global search functionality to maybe my users lost a file and they know it's got the word important in it or something. I can just quickly type in some information about what I'm looking for, and that brings up maybe the file that the user wants restores. It tells me that I've got 42 different versions of the backup held in the system. And then if I go into it here, you see a reverse chronological order, all the backup copies that are held to that file. And if we keep going down here, you should see a little cloud icon. And what that means is that according to the SLA policy that this machine is protected under, that backup copy has aged out and been sent up to whatever archive location I've specified. But Rubrik software doesn't care where it is. The process for pulling back a file is exactly the same, whether it's being held locally on the appliance or whether it's already gone up to the cloud archive location. So if I just pick the latest copy, you'd get the kind of file restore functions that you'd expect. You can download it through a browser, you can restore it back in place, or you can export it and send it somewhere else. I won't bother doing one of those because that's not wildly exciting. What I think is a little bit more exciting is this concept of doing a whole system restore, and this is the live mount functionality that we spoke about earlier on in the presentation. And again, if I think about maybe one of your on-premise VMs has become corrupted, or perhaps you've got loads of patching to do and you don't really want to do that against a live system. What live mount does is give you the ability to, again, choose any point in time from that whole system backup, and then you get various options here. If I go into the machine, but the one we're interested in is mount virtual machine, and what this is doing, if I quickly do that for my machine, it's basically just promoting up the blocks that are needed to reconstitute that whole machine backup, and then presenting them back out over the network as an NFS share back to your vSphere infrastructure. So I can choose whichever ESXi host I want to do that live mount to, that the system knows about. Advanced settings here just gives you some sort of configuration about how you want that system to be powered on, but live mount really is what we call a non-disruptive operation. So the NIC isn't automatically powered on in vSpheres, but you get this clone presented out across the network. So if I just do that, kick that off, and then if I log into vSphere here and again find my machine that I've just live mounted back over the network, you'll see that that's living there quite happily. And already it's happened so quickly. I should have showed you that happening down here, but you can see that it's already presented that back as effectively a copy, a point in time copy of that machine from the last good backup back to my vSphere environment, and you can see that copy presented as a clone with a time and date stamp here to show that that's effectively a copy of that machine. And then it's up to your infrastructure guys whatever they want to do. They can delete it, they can corrupt it, they can vMotion it. You can't do anything to change the recovery point of that machine because of the fact that we're using these immutable snapshot copies to do this process. And just as we can do that for VMs, you can do the exact same thing for databases. So you could present entire copies of your Oracle or SQL backups back out to your on-premise SQL servers, and we've got quite a number of DBA customers now who find that really powerful, because they can start doing things like, running reporting and business information against those clones, where previously it's been very cumbersome. They've maybe had to do a lot of log shipping and moving stuff across the network because they can't run business information reports against the live database, and that's been quite cumbersome, rebuilding stuff and moving stuff. And with this live mount capability, you can very quickly, as you can see, spin up an entire copy of that machine from your backups, and then use that to run reports and things against it without crucially impacting the live system, but also bear in mind it's not taking up any extra space on your SAN or onerously over your network. So that's how we do live mounts, which I think are quite a powerful feature of the Rubrik backup system. Once you've got it there, you can leave it up. You can, as long as you need it, you can vMotion it, test patches, whatever you need to do, and you can see in the live in the UI where that live mount's running, and then you just simply need to unmount it when you've finished, or you can script that process if that's something you're doing on a regular basis. And as well as that, there's also a kind of instant recover option, which is exactly the same thing, but this is your sort of disaster recovery scenario. The VM's been corrupted, it's had a ransomware attack, it's completely taken out of commission, and if you use the instant recover feature, which I can show you again from those options just to make that clear. If I just find my machine again, and I'll find it from here just to show you that global search again. So I can go back to my machine and then again choose the recovery point that I'm interested in, and as well as that mount virtual machine option, you get the instantly recover, which is just, there's been a disaster, quickly rebuild that machine and send it out over the network and replace the VM that's there at the moment, and if it is there, it will power off and deprecate that machine, so you can instantly get your users back online or access to whatever was running on that VM. There's also some other options, which is export, which is like a more of a traditional restore. You can recover files from here, and this launch on cloud option is, as Rob mentioned in the previous part of the presentation, this is that ability to instantiate your VMs as cloud compute. So it will do a conversion process. For example, if you're into your AWS account, it will convert that VM backup via an Amazon machine image into EC2 compute. So that's also giving you that kind of DR capability if there's been some sort of incident on your on-premise infrastructure. And that really is kind of a high-level overview of the cloud data management software. Obviously, for a backup and a recovery product, there's some very granular reporting. There's there's canned reports that the system ships with, which show you a lot of information about your environment. But there's also which I'll show you in a minute when it comes up. These are the sort of canned reports that come with it. But again, you've got this, because of the API functionality, you've got this kind of ability to create very detailed custom reports. And you can see there's thousands on here that people have created. And you've got the ability, of course, to download those or schedule them and send them out on a daily basis or an hourly basis or what have you. And that's pretty much it for the overview of cloud data management. As Rob mentioned, we've got this SAS Overlay Platform, which sits on top of it, which I won't go into too much detail about today because we do have some subsequent sessions coming up on that. But if I just quickly show you what that looks like, you'll see how that kind of sits on top. And again, it's very easy to access from the web, and you'll just get a link. And then when you log in, you can see basically the health of your entire Rubrik footprint. So if you've got different clusters, different areas where you're using Rubrik to protect your systems, you've got this kind of global viewpoint on top, and of course all the other stuff that goes on in there, which we're going to talk about in subsequent sessions, like the Office 365 protection and the cloud native protection. And I think in the interest of time, that's about all I need to show you. So I'll hand back to Rob to wrap up.
Thanks, Juliet. You're right to pass me back on, Lucy. That's great. Well, finally, guys, I just want to say thank you from Rubrik for attending. We've obviously summarised and gone through the Rubrik platform from an overview, showed you the demo from the cloud data management piece. So at this point, I'll pass back to Andy to cover the last bits of the demonstration and webinar.
Lovely, thank you very much, Rob, and also thanks to Juliet for the demo there, and also for Stu, who's been busily answering questions in the background on the chat. I do hope those of you that have attended have found it to be interesting and valuable this morning. At Q, we're very excited about our potential with Rubrik. We're working closely now across the UK and seeing real value in particular environments, particularly as many of our customers now are moving to hybrid cloud environments and looking to protect their critical data within their data fabric. So yeah, we're very optimistic around the potential for Rubrik within our customers. We're also investing heavily in Rubrik technical capabilities, and we were recently named as the UK's first Rubrik authorized support centre. So if there are any specific questions that we haven't covered or you would like to ask, please contact us via your normal route or via our dedicated email address. That's rubrik@qassociates.co.uk there on the screen. As mentioned earlier, we'll also be working with Rubrik to present 3 additional events around related topics and go into a bit more detail around some of the topics that Juliet and Rob have mentioned this morning. So the next event will be around ransomware protection. That's in 2 weeks on Thursday, the 11th of June. And you should look out for an invitation in your inbox, and you can register via the same platform if you'd like to attend that. And then following that, at 2-week intervals, there will also be the second event or third event in the series around database backup, and then the final event around Microsoft 365 data protection 2 weeks later. This event has also been recorded and will be posted to the Q Associates YouTube channel, that's Q Associates UK, later this afternoon, and will also be available on demand on the Q Associates website. So that brings us to it concludes the broadcast today. I do hope you found it useful, and thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.